people have talked for a long time, ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union, about a multipolar world. The truth is, there really isn't an existential threat to the United States now with the collapse of the Soviet Union. We're a huge trading partner with China, and that economic relationship is a very powerful foundation that helps keep political differences under control. Russia is just a totally different country than the Soviet Union was, and frankly, I think is stagnating under Putin's leadership. But we have a variety of challenges, even though there's not one big overriding threat like the Soviet Union was. There are far more smaller conflicts and challenges that are increasingly difficult for the United States and other countries to manage. The whole Middle East, Iran, North Korea, Afghanistan, Pakistan, all of these are continuing challenges. And I used to tell President Bush and then President Obama what's different in crises today from when I first joined the government was that in the 60s and 70s, crises would crop up like Middle East wars and so on, but then they'd go away. They'd be resolved and they would go away. Nothing ever goes away anymore. And so more and more is piled onto the plate for a handful of the senior-most policymakers to have to deal with. And frankly, it's stretching the capacity of governments to deal effectively because there are so many of these different kinds of problems. And although you've got this giant national security bureaucracy, at the end of the day it boils down to 8 people who are at the end of the funnel. I think the map, if you will, of the world today is one where huge conflict and huge danger is dramatically reduced from during the Cold War. But the likelihood of smaller wars and of terrorist acts and other acts of violence is significantly higher. The threat from the Soviet Union was existential, but it also was largely theoretical in the sense that the likelihood of there being a war was actually fairly small, except on a couple of occasions during the 45 years of the Cold War. Now we have a situation where the threat is much smaller, but the likelihood of something happening is much greater.